You're starving. Right in front of you is a dish that people from all over the world call one of the greatest tasting foods on earth, smoky, tender, perfectly seasoned. But you can't eat it. Why? Because it's pork. Now here's the thing, the question, why can't you eat it, is actually the boring question. The real question, the one that should keep you up at night, is, where did this prohibition come from? Why do nearly 2 billion Muslims and 15 million Jews across the entire planet agree on this one thing? And why does Christianity break from both of them? And, most intriguing of all, what does science actually say? In this video, we're going to dig into 3 major world religions at the same time, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, and then we're going to fact-check all of them with modern science. Ready? Because the answer is way more complicated than you think. Segment 1. Background. Before we get into each religion, there's one fact most people completely miss. Pigs were not always considered unclean throughout all of history. In ancient Egypt, pigs were raised and eaten freely. In medieval Europe, pork was the primary protein source for common people. But in the ancient Near East, the region we now know as Israel, Palestine, and the surrounding areas, a prohibition against pork emerged from 3 major traditions: Judaism, Islam, and early Christianity. This is no coincidence. All 3 share the same root. We call them the Abrahamic religions. And all 3 have a different answer about pork. Let's start with the strictest, Islam. Segment 2. Islam. In Islam, the prohibition on pork is called haram, meaning religiously forbidden, not just not recommended, not just frowned upon, categorically forbidden. The basis is unambiguous. In the Quran, there are 4 separate verses that explicitly name pork as prohibited. The most well-known are Al-Baqarah 2:173, Al-Ma'idah 5:3, Al-An'am 6:145, and An-Nahl 16:115. In these verses, pork is described as raisun, an Arabic word meaning filth or abomination, placed alongside blood, carrion, and animals not slaughtered in God's name. But why pork specifically? Islamic scholars provide several layers of explanation. Layer 1. Aqidah, pure faith. This is the most fundamental layer. In Islam, something is haram because God declared it so. A Muslim is not required to know the exact reason to obey. The act of obedience itself is worship. This concept is called ta'abudi, unconditional submission. Layer 2. Hikmah, divine wisdom. Many scholars explain that the prohibition carries wisdom that can be understood by reason, hygiene, health, and even psychological effects. We'll unpack those in the science segment. Layer 3. Darura, necessity exception. Here's something often overlooked. Islam contains the concept of darura. In a life-threatening emergency where no other food is available, a Muslim is permitted to eat pork to survive. This shows the prohibition is contextual and life-affirming, not rigidly dogmatic. Worth noting, pork isn't the only prohibited food in Islam. Predatory animals with fangs, amphibious creatures with exceptions, and others are also restricted. Pork is simply the most socially prominent because it's the most widely consumed globally. Segment 3. Judaism. Now let's shift to the tradition that actually predates Islam's prohibition, at least historically. In Jewish tradition, the laws of food are called kashrut. Food that complies is called kosher. Pork is very much not on that list. The legal foundation comes directly from the Torah, specifically Leviticus chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14. There, God commands the Israelites to only eat land animals that meet 2 simultaneous criteria: split hooves and chew the cud. Here's where pigs become fascinating and infamous. Pigs have split hooves. They pass the first test. But pigs do not chew their cud. They fail the second. So pigs are categorized as tameh, impure, in Hebrew. The Torah even calls out pigs by name and specifically warns the Israelites not to even touch their carcasses. That's a remarkably specific call-out for a single animal. Why so specific? Jewish scholars and historians offer several compelling theories. Theory 1. Identity marker. The prohibition wasn't purely about health. It was about distinction, a visible daily practice that separated the Israelites from surrounding peoples who ate pork freely. Food is community. Food is identity. Theory 2. Political resistance. This one is historically dramatic. In 175 BCE, the Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV Epiphanes conquered Jerusalem and forced Jews to slaughter pigs in the temple and eat pork as an act of religious humiliation. The Maccabean revolt was sparked in part by resistance to this command. From that point on, refusing to eat pork became an act of defiance, identity, and survival. Theory 3. Chukim, divine decree. Like Islam's ta'abudi, Judaism also has chukim, laws followed not because we can fully explain them rationally, but because they are divine commands. The why is ultimately beyond human comprehension. One more thing, Jewish kosher law is actually stricter than Islamic halal law in several dimensions. For instance, meat and dairy cannot be cooked or served together, requiring completely separate sets of dishes and utensils. Pork is just one element of a far more elaborate system. Segment 4. Christianity. Now here's the question that breaks the pattern. If both Islam and Judaism prohibit pork, why doesn't mainstream Christianity? The answer lies in one pivotal moment recorded in Acts chapter 10 of the Bible. The Apostle Peter receives a vision. A large sheet descends from heaven filled with all kinds of animals, including those considered unclean under Jewish law. A voice says, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Peter refuses, "Those are forbidden foods." But the voice responds, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." The early church interpreted this vision as a signal that the dietary laws of the Old Testament were no longer binding for followers of Jesus. This was reinforced by the Apostle Paul. In Romans 14 and 1 Timothy 4, Paul writes that all food is acceptable, and what matters is a heart of gratitude. The key theological shift. The new covenant in Christ supersedes the Mosaic law for Christians. But, and this is important, not all Christians agree. Christian denominations that still avoid pork. Seventh-day Adventists officially recommend avoiding pork based on Leviticus. Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church follows significant portions of Old Testament dietary law. Egyptian Coptic Christians, some communities maintain partial restrictions. Messianic Jews, Jewish believers in Jesus who maintain full kosher observance. So the more accurate statement is, the majority of mainstream Christianity permits pork, but it is not unanimous. Here's an often overlooked historical footnote. Jesus himself was born, lived, and died as a practicing Jew who almost certainly observed kosher law. The theological shift happened after his death, in the development of early Christian doctrine, primarily through Paul's writings and the Council at Jerusalem in Acts 15. Segment 5. Science. Alright, let's leave the ancient texts for a moment and walk into the laboratory. What does modern science actually say about pork? The case against pork. The most frequently cited scientific argument is Trichinella spiralis, a parasitic roundworm found in undercooked pork. The infection, called trichinellosis, can cause fever, severe muscle pain, and in rare cases, life-threatening complications. Then there's Taenia solium, the pork tapeworm. If its eggs are accidentally ingested and migrate to the brain, they cause neurocysticercosis, one of the most studied causes of acquired epilepsy in developing countries. This is not a hypothetical risk. Pigs are also known reservoirs for zoonotic diseases, pathogens that jump from animals to humans. Remember the 2009 H1N1 swine flu pandemic? That virus originated from genetic mutations within pig populations. The counter-argument science pushes back. But science also presents the other side of the story, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting. First, ALL, the parasitic risks mentioned above, can be completely eliminated by cooking pork to an internal temperature of 71 degrees Celsius, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. With modern food safety standards, the risks are effectively managed. Second, pigs are not uniquely dangerous animals. Cattle carry Taenia saginata, the beef tapeworm. Chicken carries Salmonella. Raw fish carries Anisakis. The question becomes, why did religious prohibitions specifically target pigs? Third, there's the famous ecological economic theory proposed by anthropologist Marvin Harris in his 1974 book Cows, Pigs, Wars, and Witches. Harris argued that the pork prohibition in the ancient Near East was an adaptive response to the environment. Pigs are highly inefficient animals in hot, arid climates. They require shade, large amounts of water, and cannot graze on scrubland the way sheep and goats can. Raising pigs in the desert was an economic liability. Religious law may have simply codified what was already practical wisdom. Fourth, some nutritional researchers have pointed to arachidonic acid, a fatty acid found in higher concentrations in pork fat, as a potential driver of inflammatory responses. However, this research remains contested and cannot serve as a standalone conclusion. The scientific verdict: pork is not inherently dangerous by modern standards, but historical concerns about hygiene and disease prevention had a legitimate basis for their time and context. Science can explain the mechanism. Science cannot tell you what to eat. That's the domain of religion, culture, and personal ethics. Segment 6: Conclusion. So after this deep dive, what can we actually conclude? Islam and Judaism both prohibit pork, grounded in explicit sacred texts and powerful traditions. Both acknowledge a form of unconditional faith-based obedience, while also recognizing that wisdom may exist beyond what we can fully explain. Christianity underwent a profound theological shift largely through Peter's vision and Paul's theology that freed most of its followers from Old Testament dietary law, but not all denominations followed the same path. Science confirms that historical concerns about pork had real biological and ecological foundations, but science also shows that modern food technology has largely neutralized those risks. The most important takeaway from this video isn't who is right. That's not our question to answer, and frankly, it's the wrong question. The real insight is this: a single animal became a point of convergence and divergence between the three largest religious traditions on Earth, and the reasons, faith, identity, politics, ecology, and science, are all woven together in ways that are impossible to fully separate. That's what makes this so fascinating. What looks like a simple dietary rule turns out to be a window into the deepest questions of human identity, history, and belief. If this video made you think, please subscribe, and drop a comment below. Which topic do you want us to tackle next in this series?